Allahu ya Allahu ya Allahu.
We sent messengers as bringers of good tidings and warners, so that mankind will have no argument against Allah after the messengers. And ever is Allah exalted in might and wise.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Look who is here with us today. MashaAllah, MashaAllah. We've been talking a lot about the prophets. So much so that I thought today it'd be interesting to talk more on the subject of the deeper message that comes and covers several of the prophets at the same time. We talked about Moses, or Musa alayhi salam, and we went right up to the time of his death. And by that time, there were a lot of believers. There were so many believers, followers of Moses. They believed there was only one God, not give the false worship, to these idols and statues. But then, after he died, the people started falling back into their same bad ways. And it seems like this is a pattern with people, that if they don't have someone there to guide them, someone that they can look up to as a role model, then they fall into this very same thing, time and again, time and again. And after Moses, there was one who was a follower of his. He led his people for a while, and he tried to keep them on the straight and narrow, but he had trouble with them too. One of the things that they kept getting into is wars. They like to get into wars and, beat people back, kill people, do things. And then after he died, another prophet came, according to them, and they said his name is Ezekiel, and we call him Ezekiel. Now, whether or not he was really a prophet or if he really lived in that time, this is something that Allah knows best. We don't have it in the Quran, but we have the story. The story is very clear. It's a strange story. And when I was growing up as a kid in Christian school, we heard this story. And when I came in Islam, we heard it again. I said, it must be a true story because I'm hearing exactly the same story. But I'll give you the details as much as I can remember. It starts out something like this. The children of Israel were living in Palestine. Ascalon was the city that they were in. Then a plague broke out. Now, a plague, that's when everybody gets a disease, and you give it to him, and he can give it to her, and all of a sudden everybody has it. It's a disease that everybody gets. But some of the people tried to run away. They said, oh, wow, everybody's getting sick, so we're going to run off. And a large number of people ran away, and they went to a plateau or a flat area, And everything happens by Allah's command. Whatever he says is going to happen, it will. So Allah ordered that all the people in the city that had the plague would die. So they all died about the same time, just like that. The ones who left, they thought, hey, we beat it, because we left, right? But Allah's command came for them the same way, die. And they also died. Of course, today we would use our mind and we'd say, well, they probably just had the plague too. But it really doesn't matter. What matters is Allah said, it was time for you to die, whether you try to run away or not. If you try to escape, it won't help you. Now I want to go back to Moses for a minute and tell you what happened to him. Just before he died, just before Moses died, the angel of death came to him. And when he saw the angel of death come, Moses doubled up his fist, pow, and he hit the angel of death and knocked his eye out. His eye was hanging out. The angel went back to Allah. He said, Moses knocked my eye out. Allah said, okay, we'll fix his eye. He said, he doesn't want to die. He said, you tell Moses to put his hand on top of one of the animals, and for every hair of that animal that's under his hand, we'll give him another year to live, which would be like maybe a couple thousand hairs, on an animal, and you put your hand out like that. So the angel went back to him again. I'm sure he was like, hey, wait a minute, I just want to talk, And he told him, If you put your hand on the top of the animal, for every hair under your hand, Allah is going to give you another year. Musa asked him, and then what will happen? He said, well, you're still going to die. He said, okay, then take me now. And so the angel of death took him then. Because when he realized you just can't get out of it, you have to die. Now this is what Allah said about it in the Quran. Kullu nafsin da'iqatul maut. Every single soul has to taste death. And it doesn't matter who you are, you will die eventually. So these people didn't accomplish anything by running away. If they would have stayed where they were, they would have died. Or if they ran off, they would have died. You're going to die when Allah says you're going to die. Omar ibn Khattab, if you know who I'm talking about, he was one of the big leaders after the death of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was taking his army towards Syria at one point, and on the way, Abu Ubaidah had come back to him from that area. And he said, listen, there's a big plague, a pestilence breaking out in Syria, and people are getting sick and giving each other this disease. And Omar put the brakes on. He said, okay, hold up right here. He said, I'm going to tell you what the Prophet ﷺ said. He told us that whenever you're in an area where there's a disease, where there's any kind of plague like this, you have to stay. You don't enter it, and you don't leave it. So if you hear about a plague, you don't go there. But if you're already there, you don't leave. Now this is 1,400 and odd years ago. And today we know that's exactly what you have to do. And they call it quarantine now. And if somebody gets a disease like this, it starts passing around, they put them in quarantine, don't they? They make them one part of the hospital, and you can't go in there unless you wear a mask, or you have to have some, protection around you and everything so you don't get the disease and pass it around. Because that's a big problem. Amazing, isn't it? How that Allah let them know way back then. Oh, I wanted to tell you what happened next. So after these people died, there wasn't anybody to bury them. They all died at the same time, right? Guess what happened? Now this plateau is kind of like a mountain. It goes up and then it's flat on top. So nobody really ever went up there. So if nobody's there and everybody's dead, what's going to happen? Skeletons, bones. So there were bones and bones and bones everywhere. It would rain, maybe move them around, and this and that happened. But all the bones of all these thousands of people are still there. And so, all of these right on top, just laying up there. Now, they didn't turn to dust yet. They hadn't turned to dust. They were still bones. And so this man came, and they said he's prophet Hezekiah or Ezekiel. Doesn't really matter. What matters is the story, because it's mentioned in Quran that a man came along and saw these bones, and he wondered, how could Allah bring people back to life? Because Allah tells us that he's going to bring everybody back to life. When I tell non-Muslims about Islam, I always like to tell them there's some real good news and there's some bad news. The real good news, everybody gets to be resurrected. Now, some religions teach only our guys are going to be brought back to life. But in Islam, we know everybody's going to be brought back. Everybody. So Hindus will be brought back to life. And so will all the Buddhists. And so will all the atheists, Christians, Jews, Muslims. Everybody will be brought back. That's the good news. The bad news. Well, the bad news is not everybody gets to go to paradise. Not everybody gets to go to Jannah. And that's the bad news. But anyway, the prophets and the people that are spiritually guided by Allah, they know some things, and one of the things they know about, just as you know, we're going to be brought back and Allah's going to bring us back in a real body. Now, some people will say, how is that? Maybe we just come back in a spirit form, like a ghost or something, But no, you're going to be brought back in your body. But if you look at a dead body, you see these bones, you say, how is that going to happen? How? I can't imagine that. And that's what this man was saying. He was looking at all these bones on that plateau, and he was saying, how could Allah bring bones back to life? Then Allah inspired him and said, would you like to see? Yeah, I would. So Allah sends a command. He orders the bones, go back together. So all the bones started moving, go back together. until they formed the original skeletons of each one, perfect, just like they just died, except no skin, no flesh, no muscles, but the bones were there. All the bones came back together. Then the voice said, "Would you like to see me put the flesh back on?" He said, "Yeah." So Allah made all of them come back together with their flesh, with their bodies, their skin, everything came back. And then Allah made them stand up. And then Allah gave them life again. And as soon as Allah gave them a life again, guess what? Every one of them went like this. Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. They were praising Allah, all like one voice coming from all of them. Can you imagine this? That's amazing, isn't it? Well, these are like signs. So that person who sees that would be what? Convinced. If you saw it, you'd be convinced, wouldn't you? I know I would be. But it's strange, though. Sometimes people see signs, and they're not convinced. In fact, it happened with the next generation right after this. After Hezekiah, there was Elijah. Then there was Elisha, who we call Elias. And they also watched and witnessed their people, children of Israel, do horrible things. They became really, really bad. So when these two would go and try to warn the people and tell them, you know, this evil that you're doing is going to bring bad things on you in this life and the next life. But of course, they didn't listen. In fact, they started trying to punish them, and they even tried to kill them. Elijah and Elisha went off, and they stayed in a cave till Elijah died. Elisha basically took over. But he couldn't get the people back under control. They just got worse and worse. And they were really powerful in the land by that time. What they did, they had this ark. Now, an ark is, the word in Arabic is like tabut. Do you remember we talked about Moses? He was in that little basket thing? That's called a tabut. And this thing that they had was called a tabut, only bigger. And in it, they used to keep stuff. They had Moses' rod in there. You know the stick we talked about? They had it in there. They had some relics in there. They had ancient things in there. And they believed that that ark had some kind of power. Because when they got around it, they felt really like, peaceful. It's called sakina, or tranquility. They felt that. And they felt powerful. And they felt like wherever we take this ark, nobody can beat us. Now, this is mentioned in the Bible real clear that they used to do that, to take that ark, and somebody would carry it. Actually, it took several people, and you weren't allowed to touch it. One of the stories in the Bible said somebody touched it, and he was like electrocuted, just boom, gone, just like that. I don't know if it's true. It's just a story it has. No skin, no flesh, no muscles, but the bones were there. All the bones came back together. Then the voice said, "Would you like to see me put the flesh back on?" He said, "Yeah." So Allah made all of them come back together with their flesh, with their bodies, their skin, everything came back. And then Allah made them stand up. And then Allah gave them life again. And as soon as Allah gave them a life again, guess what? Every one of them went like this. Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. They were praising Allah, all like one voice coming from all of them. Can you imagine this? That's amazing, isn't it? Well, these are like signs. So that person who sees that would be what? Convinced. If you saw it, you'd be convinced, wouldn't you? I know I would be. But it's strange, though. Sometimes people see signs, and they're not convinced. In fact, it happened with the next generation right after this. After Hezekiah, there was Elijah. Then there was Elisha, who we call Elias. And they also watched and witnessed their people, children of Israel, do horrible things. They became really, really bad. So when these two would go and try to warn the people and tell them, you know, this evil that you're doing is going to bring bad things on you in this life and the next life. But of course, they didn't listen. In fact, they started trying to punish them, and they even tried to kill them. Elijah and Elisha went off, and they stayed in a cave till Elijah died. Elisha basically took over. But he couldn't get the people back under control. They just got worse and worse. And they were really powerful in the land by that time. What they did, they had this ark. Now, an ark is, the word in Arabic is like tabut. Do you remember we talked about Moses? He was in that little basket thing? That's called a tabut. And this thing that they had was called a tabut, only bigger. And in it, they used to keep stuff. They had Moses' rod in there. You know the stick we talked about? They had it in there. They had some relics in there. They had ancient things in there. And they believed that that ark had some kind of power. Because when they got around it, they felt really like, peaceful. It's called sakina, or tranquility. They felt that. And they felt powerful. And they felt like wherever we take this ark, nobody can beat us. Now, this is mentioned in the Bible real clear that they used to do that, to take that ark, and somebody would carry it. Actually, it took several people, and you weren't allowed to touch it. One of the stories in the Bible said somebody touched it, and he was like electrocuted, just boom, gone, just like that. I don't know if it's true. It's just a story it has. You know, sometimes you can take something that's really from Allah, but mess it up. Like the stick from Moses. That's something amazing. Allah made it turn into the snake and do all the stuff it did, and then turn back to a stick. But now they had it as part of this, in this ark, along with some of the other things. Some scripture that they had too. In fact, they used to claim all of their scripture was in there. And then when they would carry it around, they said it was given power. But really, the power only comes from Allah. Isn't that true? Allah could use a stick. Allah could use a book. He could use a lot of things. But it's still Allah that's got the power. And this is the mistake these people were making. And everywhere they would go, they would carry this big ark and put it out. And their enemies would be terrified. They'd be like, those are the guys with the ark, you know? And then they would go in and defeat them and battle and do all the stuff that they did. And no matter what their prophets told them, they wouldn't listen. They said, we don't need to listen to you. We have the ark, okay? We got power. We got what we need. So take a hike. And the more that these guys started arguing, the more they'd say, okay, why don't we just kill you too? So they wouldn't listen. They were very stubborn. Till one day, the Philistines came against them. And Allah let them take the ark away. As soon as the Philistines got the ark, immediately the children of Israel became afraid, because they said, our power is gone. Our power is gone. Oh my God. You know what happened? They went and told their king. They had a king. They said, they got the ark. You know what he did? He dropped dead on the spot. He just went, boom, like that. Now they had no king and no ark, and the Philistines were getting all over them like ants on a picnic. It was bad. You like that? Ants on a picnic. I just thought that up. But seriously, if you think about it, when people start believing in something having power, if it goes away, then what will you have? Nothing. So it's better to believe in Allah. Always trust Allah. But Allah didn't forsake the children of Israel. He just tested them. It wasn't long. He sent them another prophet. And he was talking to them about believing in Allah and that they should do right. Now they'll listen, by the way. This man was telling them the same as all the prophets did, which is worship God without partners and don't worship something else. Obey your prophet, things like that. And they were listening. They were paying attention because now they didn't have their ark anymore. Now they've been beaten really bad. Oh, and they had divided up and separated from each other, and they were real scared, and anybody could kick them around at that stage. They needed help, and they knew they needed help. So what they did, this prophet had told them that they needed to get their act together, start worshiping Allah, and they start acting better, and they were going, yeah, well, okay, yeah. And then they got an idea, because they want to go back to war. They want to go back and be conquerors again and be, rulers in the land. So they told him, They said, well, we don't really want prophets anymore. We want a king. We want kings like the other people have kings. So, you're a nice guy, but we don't want a prophet. We want a king. And he said, well, you're talking about going to war. They said, yeah, we want to go to war, but we can only do it if we have a king. He said, but if I do that, if I pray to Allah to give you a king like you're talking about, how do I know you'll really follow him? Oh, we will, we swear we will. How do I know you won't be afraid and turn back? Oh, us? No, never. But if he orders you to fight, will you fight? Oh, come on, you know us. Yep, know you all right. Guess what they did? Well, listen to the story and find out. He said, I'm going to make dua, I'm going to pray, ask Allah to give you the king that you want. And he did. They said, okay, where's the king? He said, well, he's coming. He said, well, who is it? He said, I don't know. He said, what do you mean you don't know? He said, because Allah hasn't shown me yet, but he'll come. Now, when he announced Talut to the people, how do you think they took it? This guy is the king? I don't think so. That's how they took it. They did not accept that. They were given a big problem until he said, didn't I tell you? If Allah sent you a king, you wouldn't obey him. That's your king. Oh, yeah, right. Okay, so this is the king. Okay. He's weak. He's poor. He's from the bad family. He's from... Now. This is the king. They just want to give you the victory. If you want the victories, there he is. He was tough. He was very big, very strong, very smart. Now they said, okay, sure, yeah, right, whatever. Now, from right here, where I'm telling the story, you can go and read this in verse 243, I think it is, to about 248, somewhere like that, in Surah Baqarah in the Quran. And this is the story of what happened. So he took this army, he started training them. Talut, he's training them. Exercise, build your bodies, do all the stuff that you do to prepare for wars. Got them going up really good. And then he said, okay, you guys are ready. Now let's go. Before we go, listen to me. And by the way, there were thousands of them. He said, we're going to come to a river. And I want you to listen. When we come to this river, don't drink out of it. And I'm going to see how good you can obey. But I'm telling you now, before we get to the river, don't drink out of it. And somebody probably said, well, what if I'm real thirsty? He said, okay, no more than just a little bit of water you catch in your hand, but no more than that. That's it, max. So sure enough, they go, and they get to the river, and they're traveling across, and right away a bunch of them jumped in and started going, I'm thirsty, and drinking it all up. And a few just took a little bit, and some didn't take any at all. And all of them that drank all the water, he said, you're not with me anymore. Go on. And we're like, why? He said, you don't obey. You have to obey. In the military, you have to obey. Ask anybody, even today, ask the military, is it okay if I disobey commands when we're in battle? And they'll tell you, no, you have to obey. Well, till next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Allah, ya Allah, Allah, ya Allah.
In the name of Allah, Lord of all the worlds, there is no God but Him, the living and eternal. Allahu ya Allah.